Here's the thing that I found with right-wing political pundits and social commentators. They may be ideologically driven, but they also insist on their very substantial fees, which means that they expect you to pay for their opinions, which means in turn that it's been a little difficult to get their point of view represented on this stage. Ezra Levant, on the other hand, appreciated my suggestion that we should hear from the right particularly at this time when it appears that the right is finally in a period of retreat. Now, however, I have my significant problems with the right in the area of social policy, things like abortion and gay marriage, marijuana, and so on. I take my hat off to Ezra Levant for defying the censors and for having the cojones to publish those Danish cartoons, which, incredibly, were said to justify rioting and killing by the loony side of the Muslim world. And I must say, regrettably, it also revealed the lily-livered nature of our own media, who under the guise of sensitivity clearly capitulated to political correctness and to the not-so-veiled threat of violence. So Ezra just wanted Canadians to see what the fuss was all about. Ezra and now Maclean's magazine are being afflicted by our so-called human rights commissions, which, once established, of course, must find malfeasance to justify their own existence, and are being cleverly used by Muslim activists to shut up those critics of Islam's recent contributions to the world. So, you can print fucking Mein Kampf in Canada, but you can't print those cartoons. And to remind us that all of this is no joke at all, last week at our radio station we interviewed Salman Rushdie. But we could not announce the time of the interview nor invite any audience because, of course, his life has been made hellish by a fatwa placed on his head by a so-called man of God, who thereby was acting, in my opinion, not much differently from some mafioso putting out a contract on arrival. So, Ezra has been called a soapbox hero. He's been called a debating society ham. His magazine, wherein he published those cartoons, may now be defunct, but Ezra himself is as funked as ever. Where is Ezra Levant?
Thank you for that amazing introduction. I'm impressed with your devotion to free speech, as anyone involved in communications or the expressive arts should be. And I appreciate you inviting a troublemaker like me. I have, for most of my life, considered myself a conservative, but I think that lately I've started to call myself a liberal. Because if you look at the root of the word liberal, it comes from the Latin word for freedom. And if you look at the things that I've been wrestling with over the 2 years, it's actually causes that the left used to champion so loudly. And one of the things I've been wondering is, where are the liberals today? When it comes to the matter of free speech to, say, the F word on TV or pornography or obscenity, the civil liberties types are very strong. But on political liberty, I regret that the champions of the separation of church and state, the champions of secular pluralism, who traditionally have been on the left and have traditionally fought against squelchers on the right, have been silent. And I think it's because they have allowed their sense of political correctness to trump their deep values, values like the equality between men and women, values that we thought we would never have to refight for. Those values are being challenged, even in this city, with an honor killing for which there was a first-degree murder charge just this week. Let me quickly recap the story of how I became a liberal instead of that arch-conservative from Alberta. 2 years ago, as Moses mentioned, our little magazine, the Western Standard, published the Danish cartoons of Mohammed. Not as an act of defiance, it wasn't on our cover, it wasn't anything showy, it was just to show our readers what all the fuss was about. These Danish cartoons had been the excuse for rioting around the Muslim world. Over 100 people were killed. Our readers wanted to know what it was about. We were a fortnightly magazine. We only came out every 14 days, so we thought for sure the National Post is going to run them because they're pretty conservative, and the Sun, well, that's very tabloidy, and, well, if Ken White took over Maclean's, they'll be spicy. We thought we would be the last guys to do it, so it was a small story. But as our publication date came nearer, we realized we're going to be the only people doing it. And indeed, we were the only media of any size in Canada, TV or print, to run those cartoons. The day they rolled off the press, I debated against a local imam in Calgary on the radio. It's something I do all the time. Well, we had it back and forth, and I left, probably go on to an next debate. He was so frustrated by the fact that I refused to submit to his fundamentalist idea that no depiction of Mohammed, whether it's positive or negative at all, could be printed. He went to the Calgary Police Service and asked them to arrest me. Now, they were very kind, and because he's a newcomer, and they said, we don't do that here. We're not a theocracy like Saudi Arabia. So he shopped his grievance around town and found the group so illiberal that they would take his fatwa of sorts and prosecute me. The Alberta Human Rights Commission, analogous to the Human Rights Commissions, 3 of them that are prosecuting Mark Steyn and Maclean's magazine. Isn't it amazing that in the 21st century, our police are more in tune with civil liberties than groups called the Human Rights Commissions? I have been prosecuted by the government of Alberta through an agency called the Alberta Human Rights Commission, where 15 bureaucrats have been working for 800 days on my case. I'm an industry. I'm a major crime scene. 15 bureaucrats. I think if what we're seeing is a soft jihad. We can win the hard jihads. Even a second-tier military force like Canada can beat all comers. And if anyone tries to take on the Alliance of the West militarily, we're going to win. But what about a soft jihad? Something that doesn't attack our way of life through bombs and explosions, but psychologically, that is a battle of confidence. What if we start to censor ourselves? I put it to you that when most of the Western media self-censored those cartoons, which were as innocuous as anything as you would see in the Toronto Star on a regular basis, the self-censorship was a greater destruction of our Western way of life than 9/11. 9/11 killed almost 4,000 people. It cost $1 trillion. It was a terrible tragedy. But other than those people and their families, those 4,000 people, did it change our lives? Okay, it's a bit of a hassle to go through the airport now. But other than people who join our volunteer armies, it really hasn't changed our day-to-day lives, has it? You wouldn't know a war is going on. But when the attack came not through jet planes into office towers, but into the minds of 1,000 North American editors and producers who said, you know what? There's a bit of a risk here. There's no risk when I run the Da Vinci Code making fun of Catholics, because the worst they'll do is write a letter to the editor and have a bake sale. There's no risk if I poke fun at Jews. If there was, Woody Allen wouldn't have a career. That's what he does. Scientologists, half the jokes on late-night TV are about that faith or cult. Can I even say that anymore? Well, I can about those. But why is it that the one faith that cannot be criticized, I think that devastated our Western traditions of healthy, vigorous debate. We had a self-censorship, a greater victory than 9/11. And 9/11 was a wake-up call, at least for some. But it was a quiet and stealthy jihad that got 1,000 Western liberals in the main to censor themselves. How do we deal with other religions? When you've got polygamy in Utah with the fundamentalist Church of Latter-day Saints, fundamentalist Mormons, we sweep in and scoop the kids out. When we've got polygamy in Toronto and Ali Hindi says, without fear to the newspaper, oh sure, I solemnize polygamous marriages. No one mentions it. No one talks about it. Soft bigotry of low expectations. What about the feminists? Again, I say I'm the liberal now, Moses, because I don't see Judy Rabick ringing the phone off the hook. Warning, women are being honor killed in Toronto. I don't see Henry Morgentaler raising the alarm about the separation of mosque and state, as he surely would if instead of it being a Muslim imam persecuting me. How do we deal with offensive speech? Because I don't doubt that some people were offended by what we did in the magazine. Many weren't. By the way, I was surprised and impressed with the number of Muslims and Arabs who supported us. I at first didn't believe it when I saw many Muslims taking out subscriptions to our magazine, but it was summed up by a letter we published from a Muslim woman named Rawa Khalid. I almost remember it verbatim. She said, essentially, I didn't cross the ocean to get away from that hellhole to have Sharia law follow me across the sea. So how do we deal with hate? Because I don't doubt that what I published was offensive to some. And you know, there are some out there much more offensive than me. There are Holocaust deniers. There are racists. There are anti-Semites. There are people of the vilest bigotry. How do we deal with them? If my case is acquitted, well, others are convicted every month in this country under our hate speech laws. Not for doing hateful actions. By the way, I think there should be many things that are outlawed. I think conspiracy to commit violence, incitement to murder. There are words that are crimes. We know this. Defamation, copyright violation, fraud, forgery. These are all state limits on ideas. But we accept them, and over hundreds of years we've developed real defenses. For example, in defamation law, truth is a defense. Not in the Human Rights Code under which I'm charged. Fair comment is a defense. Not in the case of Maclean's magazine. I think that there is actually a positive value to hate speech. Let me tell you what I mean. And I'm actually going to quote the former executive director of EGAL, Canada's foremost gay lobby, Gilles Marchildon, who was talking about a case of an Alberta pastor who wrote a very vigorous anti-gay screed in the Red Deer Advocate, that's the newspaper out west there. I don't know if it was hateful, but it certainly was rough. I'd call it rude. It was rude. A letter to the editor by a Christian pastor. And he was taken before the Alberta Human Rights Commission. And Gilles Marchildon of the gay rights lobby, EGAL, said, no, that's wrong. I want anti-gay hate speech, said Marchildon. What the heck? You want anti-gay hate speech? Yes, he said. Number one, I want to know who the haters are. I want them to identify themselves. I want to know who to avoid, who the good guys and the bad guys are. I agree. I'm glad I know about Mohammed al-Masri now. Number two, said Marchildon, I want a teaching moment. I want to say, geez, let's stop for a second and talk about what we just saw and why it's wrong. And number three, he doesn't want to outsource his civic duty. He doesn't want to run to the nanny state and say, make him stop. No, he wants to be a participant in democracy. He wants to teach his people how to fight back, how to debate, how to write letters to the editor, how to be confident, culturally confident. I ask you to think back over the past century of all the great liberal causes. Suffrage for women, equality for blacks, the gay rights movement itself. Each of these was achieved not through muscle, not through violence, not through money or political power, but through speech alone, for they had nothing else. Take away all my rights except for free speech and I'll win them all back. And those speakers for women's equality and racial equality and gay equality were not just passionate, they were by definition offensive to the orders of the day. It was appalling to say that homosexuality was not a crime, let alone something to be tolerated or celebrated. That was offensive. It was offensive to say that women were persons. It was offensive to say that blacks were equal to whites. We need offensive speech. We need it on the spectrum of ideas. And anyone who believes that there should be ideas, should be a spectrum of ideas, should be appalled when anyone on that spectrum is gagged. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the invitation. Appreciate your invitation. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.